Wait, how do we do this again?
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
So since we've been talking about what we've been doing, we've been super thankful for the people who've continued to support us on Patreon through this little bit of a podcasting break, even though we have been producing some videos, not as many as I would like.
We recorded them. We still recorded them.
We recorded them. The editing has not happened. That's partially because I moved. It's partially because I was covering a lot of shifts for the holidays. And partially because depression is a thing.
Winter
so I didn't get out all the videos that I wanted.
But they'll come out eventually.
It's hard. Yeah. They will come out.
But we did continue to get patrons over that interval. And obviously lots of people didn't leave. We appreciate all of you who continue to support us.
Really do appreciate that.
We have a list of people who joined since we last recorded a regular podcast episode that we need to thank because you all deserve your shout outs.
Starting with Amy Lee, who I believe sent in the donation while we were recording or finishing recording our last episode or editing the last episode. It was right after.
Right after we finished, the 24 hours later. And Amy Lee, you all may remember, was our guest on 398 and 399. So right before we stopped for the show, we had Amy Lee on, and then we got her donation right as we finished with recording. So thank you so much for your patience, Amy Lee, and for being our guest. And yes, here is your shout out.
Thank you very much. Even though I guess you had a 2-episode shout out, so getting greedy a little bit much. Thank you. And then we had John Kepler. Thank you, John.
Grady Elliott. Thank you.
Joanne Piantieri.
I'll take it.
I think I did a pretty good job. Yeah.
Thank you. Anil Sert. I almost said Snert, which is a bartender that Brigitte likes because I have undiagnosed dyslexia. Anil Sert, thank you very much.
Anonymous gave a one-time donation. Thank you for that.
Justin Mangue? Mangue?
Mangue.
Just get French with it.
You're going French. And then we have Sarasti.
And then we have a name that I think is definitely straight out of Kyrian. Tarasand.
Mm-hmm. Joan Griffey. Thank you, Joan.
Chad Burns. Thank you.
Patrick J. Holtgren.
That's a cool name.
Yeah, I like Holtgren.
Yeah, Holtgren.
I hope it's pronounced that way. Holtgreen?
It's got to be Gren with only one E. And last but not least, or most recent, is Grub Mitchell. Grub. Thank you, Grub.
Grub Michelle.
Yes, thank you all. You are all lovely, wonderful people, as are all of our patrons, all of our listeners, and all of our fans. And I also want to shout out, we've gotten a lot of really positive feedback since the end of our last show recap episode, where we said that, we've been dealing with some negative feedback and blah, blah, blah. I have gotten multiple DMs, a Facebook message. We've gotten comments publicly. We've gotten notes in Discord. Lots of people have reached out with positive affirmations of how much we are making a good difference in the world with our content, despite the haters. So big shout outs and thanks to everyone who felt like giving us that affirmation to bolster us against random assholes with 5 minutes of time to spread vitriol. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just, as we open up to the TV audience, a lot of people didn't like what was shown on their TV and decided to take it out on anyone who even said the slightest positive things about it.
And people don't like me, so it's fine. It's fine. More people like us than don't. And I just appreciated the people who felt like, literally inoculating my subconscious against that nonsense. So you're all wonderful. And with that, I think we're ready to get into Path of Daggers, Chapter 13, Floating Like Snow.
Excellent. All right. And our symbol is the banner, the dragon banner for Rand al'Thor. Welcome back to Rand. And I just want to say, this chapter, this is, when I think of Rand al'Thor, this is the Rand I think about. The wounds in both wounds in his side, the laurel crown on his head. This is the Rand al'Thor who is the king, the conqueror. It's not Sanderson's Rand al'Thor. It's not wide-eyed Woolhead. This is the man who I think of when someone's like, Rand al'Thor, the Dragon Reborn. I'm like, this guy.
Yeah, fire and ice and death.
Who's somewhat insane.
And surrounded by lords and thinking on 4 dimensions. And yeah, this is our boy.
I am the storm. And also, this book was the first one that I waited on, right? So for me, this is sort of the era when I started, like, this is when I read through the first books, and yes, I lived his evolution, but I didn't live with that Rand while I waited for more books. So
nice.
The northern horizon was purple with the fierce rain that had hammered the east of Illian through the night. Overhead, a morning sky of dark, boiling clouds threatened, and strong wind flung cloaks about, made banners snap and crack like whips on the crest of the ridge. The white dragon banner and the crimson banner of light, and the bright standards of nobility from Illian and Cairhien and Tyr. The nobles kept to their own kind, 3 widely spaced knots awash in gilt and silver-plated steel, silks and velvets and laces. But in common, they looked around uneasily. Even the best trained of their horses tossed heads and stamped hooves on the muddy ground. The wind was cold, and colder seeming for the heat it had replaced so abruptly, just as the rain had been a shock after so long without. From whatever nation, they had prayed for the baking drought to break, but none knew what to make of unrelenting storms in answer to their prayers. Some glanced at Rand when they thought he would not notice, perhaps wondering if he had answered them so. The thought made him laugh softly, bitterly. He patted his black gelding's neck with a leather gauntleted hand, glad that Tidashar did not show nerves. The massive animal might have been a statue awaiting the pressure or reins or knees to move. It was good that the Dragon Reborn's horse seemed as cold as he did, as though they floated in the void together. Even with the one power raging through him, fire and ice and death, he was barely aware of the wind. Though it flailed his gold-embroidered cloak about and cut through his coat, green silk thickly worked with gold, and not intended for wear in such weather. The wounds in his side ached and throbbed, the old and the new cutting across it. The wounds that would never heal, but that was distant too, another man's flesh. The crown of swords might have been pricking someone else's temples with the sharp points of the tiny blades among its golden laurel leaves. Even the filth woven through Sidene seemed less obtrusive than it once had. Still vile, still loathsome, but no longer worth notice. The noble's eyes on his back were palpable, though.
Quintessential Rand. That is a portrait of Rand.
Very. Yep. Just a great portrait of him. Love it.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed a lot is he starts talking a lot about another man's flesh. A lot, a prickling that seemed to be someone else's. And there is some of that, like, disassociating because you're channeling. But I also think there's a little bit of, he is now sharing a body with Moridin.
2 bodies, 2 souls. They're kind of back and forth a little bit. Yeah, I had never noticed that until podcasting through this with you. But the crossing of the streams has happened. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like, it's easy to say, oh, it's just PTSD dissociation. But it's like, the crossing of the streams has happened, and he will body swap with this guy.
And, like, we've seen the fact that when Moridin stabs his hand, that affects Rand drops the sword. Like, we know that, well, I mean, in the future. But, like, that is, Rand does feel Moridin's body. Moridin does feel Rand's body. That's why Moridin's so pissed off when Sammael takes off his hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's also some weird, like, emotional things where Moridin will have these flashes of rage, or Rand will not have the rage that should be happening, and it's not clear, and I think it increases over time. I think at this point it's probably like 5%, 95%, but the farther we get,
right, agreed,
it gets closer and closer, and then those lines cross shortly before Tarman Gaiden, and then ultimately the body swap happens at the end. So I think that we are seeing some of that here for sure. And a thing I noticed that's just important for timeline-wise is that, the storms have hit, right? Like, the Bowl of the Wind's impact is really rolling in. And he doesn't know why. He's just like, I am the storm. I guess that counts or something. But, yeah, we're really getting into, like, winter. Winter's happening now.
And we saw the bowl used at the beginning of this book.
Right. And we saw storms roll in over Perrin at one point. So it's really quick thunderstorms rolling in. But now we're kind of time jumping into and now it's winter in the Pacific Northwest.
And so I'm going to assume 10-ish days?
Yeah.
10 to 15 days after the Bowl of the Winds was used. Because I think Perrin's was like 10 days after and the storms were still rolling in.
Yeah. And we don't get a timestamp with the Galena chapter about when the column of power was in the sky, but they see the snow like starting to land. So yeah, I'd say this can't be more than 2 weeks. It's probably a week and a half. And the other interesting thing is just like he's getting so bad that like the wounds in his side, now he's got 2, and the one still, it's still called new, but like he's really getting into, he has 2 wounds now. And even the filth on Saidin is mattering less to him. Like he's really starting to get into that crushed down, how many stones can you pile on a man before it stops mattering kind of place. Like there's only a few stones left at this point. He's in that final 10% of stones getting piled on him sort of space.
I also think the taint matters less because he is perpetually tainted. And it's that whole, like, if you're in sewage all the time, you eventually get used to it. And so pulling a little more sewage in doesn't really stink the place up because it's already smelly. You know, he's already tainted in filth. He's already covered in the taint.
Well, and I mean, the wound in his side, like he's even when he's not channeling, he's carrying around magical taint in his physical form 24/7, or, you know, 25/10, whatever their day week divisions are. Yeah, it's just, Rand is getting into real sad boy space, and it's hard. It's hard for our boy. And yes, I agree with the comic of Heart and Brain that just got posted in chat, where past trauma, bad news, pandemic, and stress turns a minor inconvenience into an absolute meltdown. Yes, Rand is everything, but for him, nothing is a minor inconvenience. He's got the fate of the world. Is everything that he's doing is the fate of the world, so he can't break down.
Oh, because I thought that comic was about this past couple months with me and the... Well,
there's a reason why it's so relatable. I love Heart and Brain, Awkward Yeti. I have all of the books physically. They are one of the best comics ever. Yeah, so that is how we are re-entering our podcast wheelhouse with happiness and glee. And oh, look, Rand is miserable. So relatable.
All right, so just the next bit is... again, a sort of internal monologue. Well, let's talk about what he's doing, right? So he is going to confront a large group of rebels who were loyal to
Sammael,
the old king of Illian, who happened to be Sammael, right?
Right. Well, the king of Illian is missing, and they were loyal to Lord Brend, who was Sammael.
Right. Okay. You're right. Yes, not the king, the lord. Because Matt and Stepaneos is the king, and he was abducted by Elida.
Right.
So he's either in the White Tower or on his way to the White Tower right now.
Yeah, he's probably arriving. No, he arrives right around a couple of weeks before Egwene gets captured. He's still fairly new to the tower when Egwene meets him in the tower. So he's probably en route at this point still. But yes, he escaped being taken up by the Forsaken by sheer dint of Elida actually doing something useful for once with her Amerlin powers, even though it's not what she was trying to do.
We're in that part of the story where now if anyone's traveling over land, we're not going to see them again for multiple books. Right. Because these books are taking like a week to a month, and these people are doing multiple month travels. So same thing with Gawain. Gawain just disappears for a long time because he's just like walking.
Yeah. But yeah, Rand is going out and trying to collect these scattered remnants of the forces that Brend had collected, because they are all fundamentally just soldiers. They're not like committed dark friends, but they will turn bandit or be taken up by his enemies if he doesn't collect them in some fashion. And so he's found a decent collection of 2,000 to 3,000 men hiding in the hills. And he's like, if I can grab these guys and bring them into my banner, that should diffuse the bulk of this hazard that is now wandering the Illiana countryside.
And I'm pretty sure they're led by a dark friend, but...
Oh, Egan Padros?
We can talk about that when we meet him.
Oh, yeah. I've never interpreted him as a dark friend, so that'll be interesting to talk through.
In chapter 23, he shoots a crossbow bolt at Rand and is fried alive by asha'man.
Yeah. That doesn't mean he's a dark friend.
What else would he be?
Misled, misguided, not convinced of who Rand is. I mean, people can do the wrong thing for the right reasons. I don't know. I've never really had a strong opinion on him, so we'll see.
Oh, yeah. See, I kind of made the assumption that he was a plant, that he was always a dark friend left behind, loyal to Lord Brend, and when he saw his chance, he attacked. Doesn't explain the Tarvalin marks in his purse, though.
Yeah, and
someone had to pay him those marks.
And the way that he interacts in this chapter, I really do feel like he's a beleaguered leader of men who's trying to look out for his people. I never got the selfish vibe from him that you tend to get with Dark Prince. It seems like he actually cares about his subordinates. But killing someone who is clearly the Dragon Reborn and who has the sanction of all the other High Lords seems like a bad move if you want to protect your men. Seems like a dumbass thing to do. I don't know. Well, we have yet to meet him yet, and we're already debating who he is.
We don't get a lot. The thing is, we don't get a lot of information, so it's more context anyway about him. Yeah.
Well, first we have to consider if Lews Therin is real or not. Yes, he's real, but he's pouting currently.
Sure. Because he retreated since Codswain showed up, right? That's the whole thing. That she yelled at Rand and Lews Therin ran away.
Oh, is that's the last time that we saw LTT? Okay. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And he's like, why did Codswain make Lews Therin run away? And this is, I think I've talked about this before. I'm not totally satisfied with I haven't come up with a good explanation as to why LTT disappears for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, he's in Rand's head, and I always see LTT as an expression of Rand's anxiety and anger and fear. The insane voice in his head. The knowledge is real, but the insane voice in his head comes out because that's how Rand expresses emotions he can't handle. And I always wonder if maybe Codswain made him face those emotions, and he's dealing with them a little bit better, and that's why LTT's gone.
So I had a different thought that hits about the same points, because he's thinking a lot about how mad he is. And, he makes a joke later about how he's not mad yet. And I interpreted that as that Rand is less convinced that he's going to maintain his sanity and that he's going to survive. And so he needs LTT less. He doesn't need to push that off on someone else. He just is that person more.
I'm not insane, LTT is.
Right, and now he's like, I'm a little insane. So he doesn't need LTT to voice that for him as much. And then he comes back later. I mean, it's a waxing and waning process. But I agree with you that it could be that Codswain kind of made him face the actual reality of how insane he is. And so for a little bit now, he's going to be the insane voice in his own head.
Nice. I like that. I like that a lot. I need to read this short little paragraph here in Rand's head, because there's 3 layers going on here that I want to talk about. What would you do, he thought. Are you there? And then doubtfully hitting the doubt. Were you ever there? Silence answered, deep and dead in the emptiness that surrounded him. Or was there mad laughter somewhere in the recess of his mind? Did he imagine it? Like the feel of someone looking over his shoulder, just on the brink of touching his back. Or the colors that swirled just out of sight. More than colors and were gone. Mm-hmm. I want to stop there. 3 things. I think there are literally 3 things going on in his head.
Agree.
Mad laughter somewhere in the back of his head. That is LTT. That's him going insane. That's the mad laughter of the taint of Sidene. The feel of someone looking over his shoulder, someone just on the brink of touching his back, that's Moridin. Mm-hmm. They're almost touching. They're back to back. They're sharing bodies. It's this weird double touching thing. Or the colors that swirled just out of sight, more than colors, and were gone. That's the ta'veren swirling of seeing Mat and Perrin.
Yep.
That later develop into him seeing the swirling colors, and the more than colors is Mat and Perrin.
Yeah.
And so all of those things just on top of each other is am I insane? I don't know. I have all this shit going on in my head. One of them is insanity. The other 2 are totally legit things, so... Yeah, it's when I saw the colors here, I was like, oh my god, that's ta'veren. That's the ta'veren swirling starting up. Because we've seen it once or twice with Perrin and Mat. I'm not sure if we've seen it. I can't remember I'm not sure if we saw it with Rand or not.
Yeah, I can't remember where we see it first, but yeah, this is before it turns into anything. We aren't sure. The mechanism has not become apparent yet, but yeah, it's very notable that it is here. And this again supports he doesn't need LTT for the moment. He's plenty manifesting his own mad laughter on his own at this point. But yeah, and it was funny too, because most of the times I've read this, it's been well, that feeling of someone about to touch him, that's Alana. That's how he describes the water bond all the time. But it's always been weird because he knows what Alana's touch is like, and this is clearly something else. And yeah, it's totally the Moridin thing. That's absolutely what it is.
What follows is name salad.
Lordly name salad.
High Lords of Tyr, Carian, and Illian.
Yeah.
Notable mention, High Lord Wyramon, Dark Friend Alert. There's a line here. Blade Slender, Ericombe, and Blue-Eyed Macron and Bald-Headed Wyramon were dead men. They did not know that. Do you know what that's a reference to?
Yeah, there's a plot later. They are plotting currently, and they die for it. I forget exactly how, but he knows that they're all plotting together and knows that they will not. No, you're shaking your head at me.
I am. Min has a viewing of the three of them, that they're all dead. So that's why he says he doesn't know about the plot, but he knows because of Min's viewing that those three are dead men. It's back in Lord of Chaos. She sees the three of them and says they will all be dead.
I think they all die in his disastrous attack on the Shan, if I'm recalling correctly.
Yes.
When he turns lightning on everybody, including his own people, that's when they all die. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right.
Let me double check that.
Okay. The first lord we've got is Lord Gregorin, who becomes steward of the dragon in Illian. He's a decent guy, and he does that. The next guy that gets mentioned is Demeter Marklin, who is the first captain of the companions and like used to serve under Sammael, which we learn like literally on the next page. They give us that.
Yes. Which actually this is the first time I actually saw that.
Really?
Reading through. It's a very easy sentence to overlook, and I've either read over it or, I heard Sammael and just thought Rand al'Thor, he's serving under Rand al'Thor. No, he served under Rand's dad. Yeah,
there's one guy in the world who's like, I know your dad professionally? What are you doing? Is the dragon reborn? Like that, there is one character in the world who has this bizarre before and after, like, knowledge of Rand. Not Rand, but Rand's father, and nothing ever comes of it, but it's interesting that it exists.
No. It would have been really interesting to see him sit down with the soldier and be like, tell me about my dad.
Seriously.
It would have been really cool. And it would have, and we know that there was this connection. I would have loved to see that explored a little bit more. Let's find out about Tam's backstory, because I love Tam.
And this is one of the only people who knows that part of his life.
And I love the detail that Tam was originally supposed to be the hero of the story, right? Like, Jordan conceptually wrote this as a soldier returning from war, being in a small town and being told that he is the savior. Originally, Tam was the Dragon Reborn.
Right? And then, like, this guy would have met him and been like, didn't I serve under you? How are you the dragon? Like, that whole interaction could have happened. But instead it's, I served with your father. Awkward.
And then he never get a line from him or anything.
Yeah, so, not at all.
Anyway, it was cool to know that he was, he served under Tam. Would have loved to see more with it.
Yeah, for sure. Then the next lord we have is a guy who literally shows up once in this chapter. Lord Mark.
Yep.
This is his one and only mention. He is nobody important. Next we've got, Wyramon, who is a dark friend. Tolmaron, nothing interesting to do with him at all.
I mean, just one of the High Lords of Tyr. They, as a group, they are the High Lords of Tyr. As a group, they are the Illianers. When I look at their summaries, it's like these 6 people are almost always grouped together.
Yeah, it's just. And then we've got Rosanna, who is, this high lady who normally high ladies are not on the Council of 9, but she made it happen. And most high ladies do not wield weapons, but she does. So she's a fun piece of flavor, but there's nothing interesting about her. And then here's our 3, which you were fact checking about. Ericombe, Marklin, and Gwayam.
Yeah.
Who Min has seen death for.
Sean Chan. I don't have the third one pulled up, but yeah, Sean Chan. That's I think the first 2 out of 3 died from the Sean Chan in the final battle.
Yeah, I think they all 3 die in that battle. They're paired in her viewing and in their mentions, and I'm pretty sure they all die together. And then there's Lord Samaradred, who also doesn't matter. He probably dies in this book, I think. Yeah, so just pure name salad. Don't stress it. None of these people matter, really, except for Wyramon. Who, Wyramon is who he is. It's hard to forget him. Wyramon's fun because he's so easy to overlook. I was completely blown away when it turned out he was a dark friend. I had absolutely assumed that he was just, a strutting rooster who's just annoying and just points out that people can be weak, annoying bastards even in the face of chaos. I was deeply happy at how surprised I was when it turned out that he was a dark friend the whole damn time.
Him just being dumb?
Yeah, I just assumed he was a case example of dumb people with power, and, you know.
He's a great example of what's worse, idiots or actively being evil. It's like him versus Elida. They both seem like just active idiots, but he is actually hiding his evilness in his idiocy. Although I do think he's also an idiot.
Yeah, sure. A small-minded, small-visioned idiot, but who has chosen to use his minuscule powers for evil instead of for good.
Oof. Wyramon as Rudy Giuliani.
Ooh, I was wondering what the good comparison would be. He would have hair dye leaking down his face in a moment of stress. That's definitely who Wyramon is.
He'd show up to the Four Seasons garden as opposed to the Four Seasons hotel.
Yeah, he would absolutely schedule a press conference at a garden store. Yeah.
Give a speech to his troops drunk.
Yeah.
Get caught sleeping with an underage girl.
You are literally just describing Wyramon.
Yeah, I'm just driving Wyramon.
Yep.
Who?
Yeah,
Rudy who? No.
All right. So, bunch of lords bristling and grumping and talking over each other in the wind, and all collectively trying to tell Rand to please not go down and negotiate with terrorists by himself.
I love Rosanna's line. I doubt those Illianers lack for bows, and it only takes one arrow to kill even the dragon reborn. I like it because the guy he talks with later does try and kill him with an arrow.
Yeah. And almost succeeds. Yeah. Like, it takes a heavy twist of Ta'Veren to keep that from being a prophecy on her part.
Yeah, basically, if Rand wasn't Ta'Veren, that would have been a death for him right there.
Absolutely. If he was just some ambitious lord, goodbye. Yeah. And we get Wyramon turning agreement with Gregorin into an insult because...
Yeah, I like that. That was pretty good.
He's a dark friend.
Trusting to turn agreement.
He needs to undermine people. He needs to cut out coherence. It's one of those things where you're like, oh, he's a dark friend. You can tell because when he plays the game of agreeing and taking care of Rand, he has to do it in such a way that undermines any support he might be getting.
It's like, I'll take on this challenge. Yeah, you're right. This is a really pathetic challenge. You would be totally appropriate for it.
Right. Yeah.
Like that's it's like, insult, definitely.
Yeah.
Although I'm not sure that's him being evil. I think that is just Wyramon being a dumb ass prejudiced.
Sure,
dick.
He probably would have done that regardless of his allegiance to the dark. That's just who he is. Yeah.
So Rand shuts them all down, is like, I'm not asking for your fucking opinion, I'm doing this. Yeah. Right? Like, come with me or get left behind.
Yeah, did I ask for opinions? It's excellent.
And then we get a little bit about Dashiva and Hopwell, which I think is pretty good.
Yes.
So we've got Dashiva glowering, muttering under his breath, doing his usual, like... There's a later paragraph I want to talk about where he's, like, speaking in the old tongue. Yeah. But this one in particular, Ebon Hopwell was just 16 with a few scattered blotches on his cheeks. He wore a staring frown that gazed beyond anything in sight. At least Rand knew the why of that. It took me a little while to figure out why.
Yeah, it's a little bit scattered throughout the chapter, figuring out what's going on with these two. But yeah, it's important.
But Ebon Hopwell just basically fought a detachment of Shan Chan troops and killed some Soldam and Damani.
Yeah.
And so he feels guilty over murdering people.
Yeah. And Rand assumes that there's an element of the same thing he's going through with killing women bothering Ebon in particularly. And particularly with the case of Damani, where they are prisoners and enslaved, like there's a lot of reasons to feel very guilty for killing them. But I don't know if Rand is projecting the woman trauma onto Ebon, or if Ebon is in the same camp as Rand of feeling like women are especially bad to kill. But either way, Ebon had kind of that same moment that Rand has in TDR, where he like lines up the corpses and does that. Like Ebon has a similar thing where he's like, I piled up all the bodies and I burned them and the ashes were floating like snow and it didn't bother me. And it's like, I think you're bothered. But I mean, he's a 16-year-old soldier who can blow things up with his mind and just incinerated like probably 10 people and their horses. Like, you are not okay. But that's what you need to be okay with in order to be, an asha'man, which he is. Well, he's a dedicated.
No, he didn't he get a pin?
He got the 1 pin, not the 2 pins.
I think he just got elevated in this chapter.
I thought that Taim was only giving out the full asha'man ranks to his people, and that Loghain's the only one. Where's that line? Where's the line? Oh, he's got the... Yeah, no, you're right. He's got the dragon and the sword. You're right.
Rand gave it to him. He said you all earned it.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, it's like you have to be okay with this, Eben, but also you're 16 and you're committing fiery murder in self-defense, but still it's a lot, and he's showing it. And he is the one that breaks down with Min, right? Should have looked that up, but I assume that I remember that, but no, it's Moore. It's Fedwin Moore that melts down with Min.
Yeah, Hopwell is the one who jumps at Agnor. She's got holding Sidene.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he was bonded to Daigion, and then she feels all sad about it and yells at Nynaeve that her grief is sacred and she should chill the fuck out. Yeah. So yeah, Eben will end up being bonded to Daigion and will die trying to take down Halima.
During the cleansing,
yes. He gets the line. She's channeling Sidene. How could I forget? I am sorry, Eben. And the next thing I've got is Alana, the sensation of Alana getting punished, coming through the bond.
Yeah, I assume that's Codswain.
Yeah. Well, no, it's not Cadswain. It's the Wise Ones. They talked to Cadswain about it.
But Codswain's gotcha.
Yeah, because Sulan asked Cadswain, like, how can we punish Alana for being willful if it will hurt the Dragon Reborn? And Cadswain's like, don't worry about it. It's not going to hurt him that much. So it's with Cadswain's blessing, but that's Soralia absolutely wailing on Alana because she is Alana and needs to be taught some respect. And that's how the Aiel teach respect.
So Alana went up the combination of Codswain and Soralia.
She's one of their first joint projects in a way.
Yes. Yeah. That before they get to Rand.
They're practicing. They got to test out their chops. But yeah, they are doing whatever it is they do to Alana. We don't actually know, but we know that Rand is noticing Alana feeling indignant and shocked and surprised, and she must be feeling it very strongly to have it be coming through the bond. And yeah, she's probably being hung upside down for 8 hours a day and spanked, because that's how everything works in Wheel of Time.
I have another Moridin reference here. Lewis Theron was gone unless that feel of someone staring at the back of his head, brushing his shoulder blades with a finger was him. That's, again, that connection, that someone just touching his back is the connection with Moridin.
And is there mad voices in the back of my head laughing? Or is that just me? The answer is yes to both of those things.
But I think a lot of people contributed this to LTT, and it gave LTT a physicalness that he doesn't necessarily have. He's just a voice in Rand's head, but by Rand having these physical sensations, I think a lot of people read that as LTT being close to almost touching Rand. And I think when people are like, oh, LTT's real, he's physical, this is Rand connecting with him across ages or something like that, they're actually contributing a lot of Moridin's connection to Rand, to LTT.
I agree with that, because you're trying to reconcile two things without accounting for a third factor. You're going to come up with some very confusing and contradictory conclusions, because you're literally missing a whole other factor in the picture.
Despite the men following him, he felt alone. Despite the power, he felt empty.
He was not insane. Not yet.
Rand's doing real good, everybody.
Yeah.
Real happy.
He's having the time of his life. Definitely totally on board, all the spoons.
I'm wondering how much of this emotion, though, is actually also is him, but I'm wondering how much of it is, again, his connection with Moridin. How much of this nihilism, this feeling of emptiness, this feeling of, is he depressed or is Moridin depressed? How much of his depression is a connection with Moridin that he's feeling? How much of his nihilism is actually Moridin's nihilism?
Yeah, because Rand's depression and angst are very active and angry and raging against fate sort of energy. That's a farm boy who wants to survive and wants to take care of his sheep. Whereas, he's getting into a much more numb, dissociated, nihilistic, God's eye view, but nothing matters kind of space, that's Moridin Rand's game. That's where Sammael went. And I mean, I do think that to a certain extent, Rand is going to end up there with all the pressures being put on him. Like, he's going to have to get through the rage and into the acceptance. But I've never thought about how much Moridin is influencing his thoughts, or could be influencing his thoughts at this point. And I see it.
Well, and the reason I think that is because I think the opposite is happening. Like, we get comments that Moridin is a much more controlled. He's approaching this in a different way. He's much more... He's not, like, upfront and attacking. There's this idea that Moridin has a slightly different personality than Sammael, and some of that may be that Sammael was insane from use of the true power.
Sure.
And being in the bore for thousands of years and all that kind of stuff. But I think a big part of Moridin's change of personality is he's being influenced by Rand.
He's trying to get a little bit of humor, a little bit of flair for the dramatic, a little bit of, like, actual rage. There's amplitude to his emotions that are more the farm boy. Oh, I'd never... There are so many layers of stuff I'd never thought about with this. Yeah.
So the two of them are actually not exchanging personalities, but influencing each other's personalities, not just physically, but actually mentally.
And just over time, it gets more intense. So it's really hard to pick out when something is... It's like climate change, right? You can't say a given storm is because climate change, but, like, this trend line is pretty fucking impossible to ignore. Yeah.
And that is Jordan's genius, is that he loves to boil frogs. That man is so good at introducing you to a concept so slowly that you're 3 books in and you realize you are deep, deep into it and you don't know where it started.
Yeah. I think even podcasting through it in the level of granularity we're never going to actually know. I don't even know if Jordan completely knew. He might have just started throwing shit in there and being like, I've written the story good enough, it'll sort itself out.
I don't know. I mean, the man balanced pre-planning and organic writing in a way that I've never seen another author do. You know, Sanderson in particular, his outlines great and his story structure is fantastic, but he lacks some of the organic growth that makes Jordan's writing so good.
Yeah.
Because he is such a heavy outliner.
It's a bit of chaos magic that Jordan was able to bring into play. He called in some other energies than just logic and rationality.
Sanderson can channel. Jordan could dreamwalk.
Yes. Yes. Very much so.
Okay. Paragraph about Dashiva. Dashiva, slumped in his gray saddle like a man who had never seen a horse before, muttered angrily under his breath, in the old tongue, which he spoke and read as fluently as a scholar, probably complaining about the weather. Despite being a farmer, Dashiva disliked being out of doors unless the skies were cleared. Okay, a farmer who speaks the old tongue fluently and can't ride a horse, and hates being outside. Yeah, not a farmer.
No.
Right? Like, not a farmer.
The logical conclusion is he is a scholar who is pretending to be a farmer. That is the simple explanation. Yeah, it's so obvious.
Yeah, a lot of huge clues in that paragraph.
It's so obvious.
Clearly Forsaken.
Yeah.
Just the old tongue alone should be a fucking, like, oh yeah, if he speaks the old tongue fluently, probably a Forsaken. Nobody does that, except maybe a few of the most obscure Aes Sedai.
Yeah, a handful of nobles. There's that line when Matt is gambling in the Stone of Tyr. I was like, oh, my tutor would be proud of me. I figured out how to, like, translate one sentence. Like, that's the level of proficiency in this world. Farmers do not have scholarly aptitude for the old tongue.
The nobles speak the old tongue the way I speak French.
Right.
I'm aware it exists, and I can say hello.
Exactly, exactly. Like, yes, it's handy if you, like, need to, like, find the restroom, but it's not like grumbling to yourself about how stupid the Dragon Reborn is fluent. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we get back to Hopwell, who we should probably talk about the larger implications of what Hopwell was doing. Was he didn't just randomly kill Seanchan, he discovered for Rand that the Seanchan are back.
Yeah.
This is when Rand gets the news that his victory at Falma bought him months rather than years.
And that spear was not a good enough reminder.
No.
The Dragon Scepter.
Well, he thought that the Dragon Scepter was just to remind him of general enemies, but he was convinced that the battle at Falma was going to give him until after the last battle. He's like, sweet, I knocked out, a mini boss. It's going to be fine. And then Hopwell's showing up saying, yeah, you defeated their first form? But there's more of them than you fought in the first place. And Rand is like, so the weather has turned in a fit of black humor, and the Shan-Chan are back, bigger and stronger than ever. I have no time. It's...
And they're not just back in one place. They're back on like half the continent.
Yeah.
Right, is the other thing he's discovering, right? They're not just in Amador.
Gobbling nations.
They're in Abu Dar. They're in everywhere, yeah.
Yeah, so Hopwell brings back not just his own personal trauma as a child turned into a soldier, but also really bad news for Rand's continental conquest plans. Even though, he has to bring them in.
Amador, we saw that get taken over because from Queen Morgase's perspective.
Yes. Well, ex-Queen Morgase at that point, but yes. Same chapter as she ex-queens herself, so. But yes, we saw that.
Ex-queens herself. Nice.
And then there's this line, when he found out that the merchants in Illian had known for days before any of them thought to inform the Nine, the light forbid they should lose a chance at profit because they knew too much. He had been within a hair of scouring the city to its foundations.
Don't look up.
There's a lot to unpack there. Major don't look up vibes. And yep. Also, I like how much this is Jordan's really good world building of being like a final battle about good and evil is not just about metaphysics, and it's not just about the hearts and minds of men, and it's not just about military strategy. It's also about the economy. Mm-hmm. The end of the world has strong economic components, and the influence of merchants and markets on really big, huge, impressive things like really shouldn't be discounted. It's easy to write off the economy as a boring, stuffy side topic, but it has really big implications for like the fates of armies and nations.
What I love is how everything you said can be applied like directly to climate change, right? Like it's just all a great analogy for the merchants and the like, oh, we are going, yes, we are aware it's the end of the world, but like we're still going to profit off of it.
Oh no, what if we get rich? Yeah.
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 And we will actively undermine the effort to stop it just to make a little money off of it.
You can't cut into our profits. You can do whatever you want to save the world as long as it doesn't get into our quarterly profits. We can't handle like a small amount of loss of growth. Mm-hmm. That would be ridiculous. Like, what's the point in living if you can't have continuous growth?
For that one glorious moment, we created a lot of value for our shareholders. And then the world ended.
Yeah, it's good world building on Jordan's part. A little bit too realistic for my tastes for a fantasy series, but
I know. I'm like, oh, can we just not get into the economics of merchants screwing over anyway? Yeah.
And also, there's some good foreshadowing about Natron's Barrow scouring a city to its foundations. Rand is getting not foreshadowing of Natron's Barrow, but like he's getting to a point where he might just blast a city off the face of the earth because it's more expedient than negotiation or whatever. He's getting there. He literally blasts Natron's Barrow for reasons that are maybe understandable, but he almost blasts Abu Dar shortly after that just because the Shan-Chan are there. Like he's that breaking point is getting real close, and it's like how many books until he actually scours a city? But already here in book 8, he is one breath away from just annihilating a city.
Well, and again, in book time, it's only a month or two.
Right, but as a reader, you're just like, this guy, this is part of why this is our picture of Rand, right? Is because he stays in this, like, piss me off at the wrong moment and I will annihilate your city. Like, he hangs there for books of us being in his head. And that's why this is quintessential Rand.
When all you have is Balefire, everything looks like a Darkhound.
Accurate, though.
We get a little talking about the list of women that he kills with the Eben Hopwell thing.
With new names that have been added to the list without him remembering, because he's got at least 17 different people bouncing around in his skull at any given time.
Right. I liked a nameless dark friend represented only by a face who had died by his sword near ... I thought that was a good reference to the caravan and the woman he killed. Because that's one thing where, like, it's hard. We're like, wait, does he think about that woman? Because it was the first woman he killed.
Mm-hmm. And yes, he does. Like I was saying, like that reminds me of like how Eben, like piles the bodies up and is not disturbed by it. Like that was the line of that. Those deaths were the ones that Rand lined up and made bow to him back in TDR. Like full circle.
Which might even be why she's on the list now because of Eben Hopwell's line. Because it's right after he says that line that Rand's like, oh, now she's on the list. Maybe that made him think of her.
Totally could be. Totally could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's also where we get the line floating like snow. I think that's where the chapter title comes from, is these ashes of hopes and dreams and dead people that are traumatizing our heroes.
Floated in the wind like snow. White ash. Yeah, that's rough.
It is very rough. And then we get our bowman, who I think doesn't actually get named in this chapter, but his name is Egan Padros. And we'll talk with him, I think, in the next chapter is when we actually get his name. But here's where, Rand goes out to talk with this guy and has a negotiation with terrorists, so to speak.
You might say I do speak for him, the narrow-faced man replied warily. He is the leader, though, right?
Oh, yeah. He's just trying to not make it too obvious that if you take his head off or take him into custody, then the entire thing falls apart. He's like, yeah, I'm the spokesman. Yeah. I
also thought it might be maybe he speaks for the Great Lord, who's the actual leader, rather than like just a little Dark Friend reference. Like, I'm not actually the leader, the Dark Lord is. I just speak for him.
I can see it.
That's a
stretch.
stretch.
I don't think that's what he's saying, but...
No, I don't either, but I want it to be.
Sure. He talks about badgers. This man looks like a badger, and badgers are very dangerous when cornered. It's like, yes, you need to ease the badger, Rand. Ease the badger.
Yes, yeah, ease the badger. I missed that. And he gives up, the standard, join me or, go to jail, basically, right? Like, your soldiers, I get why you were fighting, but the battle's over, join me, or, basically be imprisoned is what I kind of assumed.
It's more of join me or go home without your weapons. I think he's not going to put them in prison, but he will take away all their arms, so that way they can't rebel against him. And they're like, well, that's a real crap choice, because we've got your Dragonsworn running around burning down farms, and we have all these fucking Aiel just popping up, being a problem. Like, you really want to conscript us into your army so we can't protect our families, or take away our arms so that we can't protect our families. Like, this is not a comfortable choice.
Yeah.
Like, this is a non-choice. And Rand's like, but I'm a conqueror.
And the last battle is coming, and very soon everybody's going to be in an army, right? There comes a point where, like, it's be in an army or starve is sort of your only options going into the last battle. The pattern really makes an effort to throw everybody it can into one of the various armies that it can get to the last battle. I almost wonder if the Dark One actually did himself a disservice by making everybody, like, all the food go away. And that if he forced everyone to go fight instead of,
if you could have just stayed home and
relaxing at home and enjoying.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. But, the Dark One doesn't want anything. The Dark One just wants to fuck with people.
The Dark One wants Rand to despair. I think the Dark One wants Rand to be in despair when he goes up to the mountaintop during Veins of Gold. That, I think, is the Dark One's only goal, is to make Rand as miserable as possible.
And having everyone he interacts with be demoralized through a lack of food, a lack of arms, a lack of safety, and he's carrying all of that on his shoulders, and he's feeling responsible for all of that. Yeah, you can't have people at home happily munching away on their emergency rations and have the dragon be despairing. You have to have him turning down these armies of people who the only thing that they can take care of is their bowstring. They are rusty. They are hungry. They probably got trench foot. Like, these are, and he has to either, like, force them into his army or send them home to be slaughtered with their families without weapons. Like, that's not going to make him comfortable.
And they bring up two opposition forces, both of which are basically created by the Dark One. The Aiel, which are just the Shido, who Sammael scattered to the Nine Winds. Because wetlanders can't tell the difference between Aiel, there's no such thing as good Aiel and bad Aiel.
Right.
And because Rand is associated with the Aiel, every time one of the Shido attack, everyone blames Rand.
Right.
Which is what the genius of Sammael's move, to scatter them all over the place.
Yeah, and it's so funny because Rand even thinks, was Sammael reaching out from the grave? Had he sown the Shido to sprout like thorns wherever Rand laid a hand? Why? The man could not have believed he would die. So it's like Rand hits the mark on the head. Like, yeah, Sammael did that. And you know why he did that? Because let the Lord of Chaos rule. Not because he believed he would die, but because he knew that the only result of doing that would be chaos. And so it was a good bet.
And then the other thing is the Dragonsworn, which I think is that's Grendel influencing Massima.
Sure. Plus just the general chaos of warlords and banditry. Like there's plenty of organic chaos in the hearts of men, which is part of what he's trying to do with collecting these guys, is to keep them from becoming bandits who are indistinguishable from organic Dragonsworn. Even though obviously they wouldn't be Dragonsworn if they literally reject the dragon. But like it's good Aiel versus bad Aiel, right? Like bandits and Dragonsworn, like if they're not directly influenced by Massima, which one are they?
Yeah. Well, and it's like, is Bashir Dragonsworn? Is Matt Dragonsworn? Is Perrin Dragonsworn? Technically, yes. But they're not part... And so Massima, you know, co-opting the Dragonsworn label makes all of Rand's allies look bad.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, yeah, there's people who... Yeah, Dragonsworn is a very easy label to throw around. It has not like gone through... It's not a vetted term. It doesn't have a rank associated with it. It's just a general way of saying you're a chaos machine. You have decided to do what you want. You might as well be taken by the dragon. Like, it's very broad and very inconsistent.
I think of it as the dragon has broken whatever previous bonds you have, and you've sworn to him. So you have no therefore, like, you can forsake all of your previous bonds because the dragon breaks. You know, that's that whole...
Yeah. But does that mean that you have allegiance to the dragon, or that you have lost allegiance to whatever you had allegiance to?
Exactly.
Those are the poles.
Well, and Massima justifies it by saying, I have allegiance to an idea of a dragon. And that idea of a dragon is something I get to decide what it is. And that's true for a lot of religious zealots. They worship this thing in their head that they then control.
Yeah, I have a direct line to the source of this information. I am a humble servant, but also you need to listen to me because I am the highest ranked of all the humble servants, because the dragon's talking in my head. So
now, and with Massima has a literal dragon talking in his head. That is different, right? He has Grendel dressing up as Massima, visiting him in his dreams, giving him orders. Like when he says, I have the dragon reborn visiting in my dreams and giving me orders, he has someone doing that. It's just not the dragon reborn.
And I do think that even without Grandel's influence, he'd probably be claiming that. The fact that Grendel is doing that just makes it way, way worse, because he would have convinced himself of that anyway.
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure when he starts getting visited by Grendel. I'm pretty sure it's after he starts creating the dragon's form and being insane. Yeah,
passing through Flicker and seeing the Battle of Falma, like that gets him 90% of the way to being the prophet of the Lord Dragon. Grendel just notices that and like adds a little fuel to that fire. in a chat, Massima is the Pope of the Dragonsworn. Yes.
I think he's more like Peter.
Peter is the first Pope.
Who was the first?
I don't know. I don't do Bible stuff. I'm pretty sure Peter is the first.
I don't know the Bible stuff.
One. Okay, thank you, chat. You're confirming that. Peter is the first Pope. Yeah, and so yes, Massima is got some Peter vibes, which honestly, if I'm recalling my Bible stuff correctly, Peter's also one of the douchiest apostles.
Yes.
So that fits.
Christ didn't spread Christianity. He preached it, but he didn't spread it. He had it was his apostles who spread it after his death.
Yeah.
And Peter was really the one who, you know, more than anyone else, I think was the guy who was like, Jesus was this thing. Yeah,
there was dozens of mystery cults in the occupied Roman territory of wherever the fuck Jesus was happening. There was lots of mystery cults and lots of people proclaiming to be the savior. And Jesus was one of many cult leaders, and he happened to get some pretty cult leadery followers who successfully pulled political strings in Rome to actually get this one particular cult elevated. The history of Christianity is fascinating when you look at it from a historical perspective of like, how exactly did this happen? What is the context? And like, it didn't have to happen. Like from a historical anthropological perspective, like there was a lot of work that people had to do after Jesus was lynched to make Christianity what it was.
If Jesus himself even existed as a person, right? There's a lot of evidence that suggests...
But lots of prophets were lynched in that period, so...
Yes, right. But like, you know, there's no way to say like he was in the same way that you know, I think that Peter was essentially... When they wrote the Bible, Jesus was an amalgam of a lot of different stories and people, some of which existed, some of which didn't.
And that repeated several times over the first 1,000 years.
Yes.
There was many consolidations and editorializations, and whether Jesus was a person or an amalgamation of people is a matter for great. There's so many podcasts and books out there delving into this. Clearly, we have the surface as hobbyists. But Messima as that is yes.
Yeah. Messima analogy is where I'm trying to go with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
They do say the storm be coming. I like that line.
And it comes out organically.
A lot of characters are starting to just organically say the storm is coming. Everything from, it starts here, but we even get like Amos Blunt with the apple farmer. That's when he, in the beginning, when Sanderson does that a lot, where the storm is coming.
Yeah, no, it's the world is starting to, it looks like chaos, but there is a pattern emerging. The world is starting to align its way towards this final battle, and the Bull of the Winds bringing on the storms of winter that have been so long delayed. Like, it really works. And there's just this subconscious pattern is like, hey, Rand, you need to know the storm is coming. Like, it really is. There's a harmonic resonance in reality that the storm is coming. And this Padros guy, it just pops out of him because he is the vessel that is there. The Zeitgeist be stormy. Thank you, Lillian. Amazing line. So, the guy says, well, even if what you say is true, Rand's like, it is. Get over it. Figure it out by noon. You can't tell when noon is. I don't give a shit. Rand is cranky. Right. Rand needs a Snickers.
Yeah. He's not really negotiating a good faith here. It's basically do what I say or die.
Yeah, it's a problem. And then they head back to the Ridge, and we learn more about how Rand's relationship with the power is progressing. He lets go of the power and he sees double, and the world tilts, and he's worried that this is the beginning of his body rotting away from power madness. But it doesn't seem to be lasting very long, so it's fine. I'm not going to talk about it with anyone. I'm not going to check it out. There's nothing I can do. Not only is his mind getting pulled in 3 directions by 3 different people, not only is he in physical pain, he has a new symptom of power sickness to deal with at this point.
And, I mean, the seeing double has to be the Moridin connection. He's in 2 different bodies. He's trying to pull power in from 2 different ways. This has all the seeing double, all the sickness, all the nausea, all the trouble embracing the power. That is 100% his connection with Moridin.
I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. He sees double when the streams cross, and this is a new problem, and it doesn't last very long. No, yeah, you're right. It makes way more sense for this to... It's not actually power sickness. It's stream crossing side effects.
Moridin, yeah. The only thing it might be with the power is that maybe he's experiencing something of true power usage, that like whatever symptoms Moridin experiences from using the true power, maybe that's somehow coming over when he embraces the one power. I don't think that's it.
Moridin never complains about dizziness, I don't think. So
no, I don't think so. So I entirely believe that this is a symptom of just like, basically he's trying to embrace the power, but he's not fully in his body.
Yeah, and like the dissociation and then coming back into his body fully. And I mean, losing the power, right? The way it makes colors duller, it makes the world duller, it makes the sky smaller. Like, there would be some vertigo with that anyway, I think. And normally channelers, it's just part of the process of letting go. But with everything else on top of him and this Moridin thing, it's very accentuated and dizzying and causes him problems later. Like, it becomes a real hazard he has to calculate for.
And this is, and anything where he's saying it's a recent problem, I go back to what was the major change that happened recently. It was the crossing of the streams, right? That just happened. And so literally the last time we saw Rand, right? Like, it was at the end of the previous book where he crossed streams.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That is part of why we chose the break point where we did, was because we hadn't, this is when we get back into Rand's head after the opening of the book. Yeah. No, you're right. So yeah. Oh, this is going to just make so much of my appreciation of what Rand is going through for the rest of this book and series so much different, because I've never spotted this Moridin stuff so early.
Oh, so this is one of the things that I really, one of my favorite reread things, and why I'm so convinced about Rand and LTT being a voice in Rand's head, is because I've been able to separate out the effects of the crossing the streams versus the effects of LTT versus the effects of the taint versus the effects of the weirdness around Abu Dar from, using the Bowl of the Winds, right? Rand is experiencing all four of those weirdnesses at the same time, and they layer on top of each other in very interesting ways. And once you figure out where to assign all the symptoms, all of a sudden you can be like, oh, this symptom goes to that problem, this symptom goes to that problem, and then everything makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, no, it's amazing how screwed up one's theories can be when you're missing like a third or a quarter of the reasons, and you're just like, what is this mystery body causing influences? Oh yeah, this is going to make the rest of my read of the series. I'm going to continue to be yelling with surprise about this.
I'm also curious if maybe Moridin doesn't avoid using the one power and uses the true power, and that's why he doesn't get the dizziness.
Oh yeah, he does actually say at some point that, or someone says that he only uses the true power. So that might also have something to do with it as well. Or he's just so stoic that he never mentions the dizziness. And also he's not dealing with literally having like multiple like abscessing wounds in his side. So he's got a few more spoons to work with. He's got crippling depression, but like his body isn't literally falling apart in the same way.
I mean, but in a way, I think he feels what Rand feels. And that's one of the reasons why Rand is able to keep going, is that some of that pain is actually Moridin's, right? Moridin feels the lack of a hand when Rand's hand goes missing. Right? So, of course he has to feel the wounds in the side.
Yeah, it's true. He never thinks about it, but yeah.
I also just love the idea that Moridin actually killed himself because he's the one who stabbed Rand in the side, and then he's in that body when it finally does die.
Well, he wanted that, so, you know.
I know, but like, yeah, that was his suicide wound, right? Like, that was literally Moridin, Sammael killing himself, was that wound in Rand's side. It just took a while. And a body swap.
Yeah, which, you know, it's not the most usual way to approach the suicide things. Well, I'll just swap bodies and stab the body on my way in. That's not traditional, shall we say?
Ooh, Frosted Angel in the Sky asks a good question. Why did it never mess with the warder bond? That's an interesting question. You would think that the warder bond bonded to the soul would like have some effect. And like when he got bonded with the girls, like that didn't affect Moridin. He wasn't brought into that at all.
Well, there is, because like we were saying before, like the transfer is not binary. It's a very slow slide. And the bonds that happen with the various women, well, with Alana, it happens before the streams get crossed. And with the three girls, maybe it's just because it's to like the more personal part of the soul and not the like metaphysical part of the soul and the body. And there's a lot we don't know about the warder bond and the ways that emotions move through and physical sensations move through. Like there might just be that the way that Rand and Moridin were body swapping just wasn't attached to the same parts of the soul as where the bond hooks in.
I would think the bond was more soul based, and Rand's, the bodies are swapping, but the souls aren't. Does that make sense? They're not overlapping souls. Yeah. It's just
the souls are not blending.
A soul swap. Yeah, they're experiencing a lot of physical overlap, and they're just experiencing each other's physical issues, but not. And they're sharing some moods, but not necessarily. They can't like read each other's thoughts.
That's mental. I mean, that's like your brain, the biomechanical realities of your brain versus like your metaphysical soul existence. Because I don't think that they blend souls. I think that they blend bodies and emotions and minds. Though obviously the bodies are physically they're not blending, because that would look really weird. There's a lot of stuff to continue parsing out as we go through this, now that you've got me on board.
And then just here, no sooner had Sandine gone, though, than the rage bubbled in place. White hot and searing, nearly as hot as the power has been. Is that all his, or is some of that Moridin? Is Moridin the one filled with white hot rage and anger all the time?
Well, I mean, Ishi and Moridin is very like aloof and nihilistic. I tend to think of the rage and the powerful human emotions as coming from Rand and bleeding over the other way. Yeah,
I just see this as external. Battling fury, he was blind to Gregorian. Like, he's battling this external emotion.
Well,
I may be reading into that. Yeah.
When I get deeply dissociated into my emotions, they feel very external. And I'm under a lot less pressure than Rand. So I tend to think that the human emotions are Rand's, and he's just breaking down. Whereas, because Moridin he's Ishi. Ishi doesn't have emotions. He just is fury. and nihilism all at once.
Yeah.
He's not... I don't know. Let us know in the comments.
Battling fury.
Come to our Discord server and debate this.
How much of Rand's attitude and personality is bleed over, and how much of it is his?
And that answer is going to be different every time we get into his head, because as time passes, the ratio is changing. So an answer that is correct in this chapter will be wrong in the next chapter, potentially.
I gave them to midday, he announced. Watch them. I don't want this lot breaking into 50 smaller bands and slipping away. I'll be in my tent. Except for the wind-tossed cloaks, they might have been stone, rooted to one spot, as if he meant the command to watch for them personally. At that moment, he did not care if they stayed there till they froze or melted. Without another word, he trotted down the back slope of the ridge, followed by the 2 black-coated asha'man and his Illianer banner-bearers. Fire and ice and death was coming, but he was steel. He was steel. Not Quindiar yet.
No, you gotta upgrade that Mo's hardness rating to Quindiar. Wow, we did a chapter. That was fun.
Good. I know, it's been such a long time. It felt like, and I feel like I pulled a lot out of that too. There was some good insights into that one. Yeah.
Yeah, that was what we love to do around here is get through a chapter, see implications across the series, like blow each other's minds, get off onto random science tangents. Like, that was just everything we love about making WoTSpoilers. That was nice. I'm glad we're back.
And some good Rand stuff too. I've missed, someone asked me who's your favorite character, and when we were on Tarvalon After Dark, I think they asked, and I ended up going with Rand, because I was like, I know it seems silly, but like, the main character is my favorite character. I like him. Jordan did a great job of putting me in his head. And as a, I think I've said this before, but like, teenage boy who was reading these books, and he's got the biggest arc and the most cool stuff and all of these various, like, I've spent so much time being in his head and thinking about what's in his head. And I love the different layers that Jordan does with the insanity and the body swap and the bonds and everything, like all that going on in his head to me is so well layered, and this is the first chapter where we really see all those layers. And so, like, this is my favorite Rand. This favorite character right here, favorite part of his arc. Love this stuff. Love it so much.
Yeah. I've often said that Rand is boring to me at the beginning. We are well past that point. At this point, we are when Rand is really fascinating, really interesting. And this is in so many ways the Rand that Min sticks with. This is the Rand that she really endures while the others, have their brief interactions with him. Like, this is the Rand that Min just is with. And Min is my favorite character. So this is the Rand that she's really, like, committed to. So, like, I'm very committed to him because I'm with Min. I'm in Min's head, and I love where she's at. And the fact that she's able to support him without needing glory and without needing recognition. And there's a bunch of sexist stuff in the writing to process. But fundamentally, the fact that she puts up with him and supports him through this part of his arc makes him so, like, I love that for her, and it makes him very fascinating to me. And also, I do empathize a lot with Rand, like, in this, feeling crushed by a lot of things, all of the rage and then the despair, like, layered into each other. This is the part that, angsty teenage Aradia really was like,
loved it.
Okay, if Rand can save the world, I can get through another day. Like,
I can do my homework.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a very, very important part of Rand's arc, and I'm really glad that we got to restart our podcasting rhythm with such a kick-ass main character chapter.
Same.
He says Rand is a millennial. Yes. Yes, he is. He spoke to us millennials as we were growing up. So yes, Rand is a millennial.
Well, and what I love is his birthday. Like, if you consider, like, was he born 981 or whatever it was? Right. I just think of that as 1981. Just add 1,000 years to it.
Totally.
And that's my, like, so, and then he was my age. He was born, like, literally that makes him a millennial. If you just say, instead of 981 or 982, he was born in, or 980, I think it was. He was born 1980.
Totally.
I like Lil Jin's line. He's seen 3 world-ending events, and he's just tired.
Yeah. Mood. There's just the constant dragging sense that the world is ending since the beginning of when your memories start. Yeah.
Oh, and the climate's changing, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. Yeah. No, you just hope that someone else goes and fixes it.
Yeah, and there's just global wars and power-hungry empires with frightening weapons you can barely wrap your head around, just all duking it out over your head. Yeah.
And ancient motherfuckers controlling all the power that just won't die.
Crusty, wrinkly fossils that should just stop already. Yeah. Old men that think they know better than you. Yeah.
And women.
Yeah.
Less women, but yeah.
Yeah, well, the patriarchy still has to get its little slice in.
There's a certain... No, we can talk about the patriarchy, but there is a certain class of rich white women who benefit from the patriarchy because they attach themselves to there's a certain amount of reinforcement that happens there.
Oh, yeah. The wealth is really the defining thing. And it's about, if you are more interested in gaining access to the power that has oppressed you, or if you're interested in tearing down those structures.
Nice. I like that's a good analogy.
A certain class of woman is much more interested in getting in on the oppressor side and having that power over others. And that is what gets, 55% of white women voting for the orange monstrosity. For example. It's, this is not an insight original to me. I've picked this up from a lot of reading of people who are much more astute in the socio-political realm. But yeah, it's it's what power do you want? Do you want the power to make a better world, or do you want the power that has been held over you? Because the power that's been held over you is shit, and you shouldn't want it. You should not want it. Please don't want it.
I will take my parents' inheritance, though. Thank you.
Yeah, well, there's inheritance and there's actively kicking people in the face on your way up the ladder. Those are not identical things in most cases.
In most cases. Unfortunately, with inheritance, it's usually inherited from somebody who did kick everybody up in the face going up the ladder.
Unpacking where one's family's wealth comes from is difficult on a lot of levels.
Yep. Now, like Lil Jin says, my parental inheritance is the only way I'm paying off our mortgage. That's sadly true for a lot of people, and unfortunately only really works if you are able to have family inheritance that goes back, more than 50 years.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to have that if you're not white. It's just I've learned so much about the American history and the redlining laws, and specifically here in Oregon,
oh god, home equity,
what they've done, home equity, and how that's passed down, and how so much of family wealth is built up in that, and that more than anything explains the difference between wealth in white and black America.
I read a really cool book 6 months ago called The Whiteness of Wealth. And it was written by a black woman who went into economics in an effort to get away from race. As that was her career choices. And then she learns that race is baked into every piece of our tax codes. And it's a very dry book because it is an economist and a statistician who's writing it. So it's quite dry, especially as an audiobook where they're reading charts and it's just very awkward. But that takeaway of it's impossible for Black Americans to have accumulated the equity that makes this vanishing sliver of an American dream even possible. It's just fundamentally impossible because of the ways that so many different things fit together like an evil genius plan. It is rough when you're I'm so lucky with my wealth that that luck is a lot deeper than I thought. That was not purely right place, right time. That was right birth, which is not fair.
Yeah, okay, I have to agree with Fire Phoenix's question. How does an audiobook read charts?
It was lists of for white families, it was 46%. For black families, it was 47%. But those titles and bars were complicated, very long sentences just to give you the titles on the charts and then just reading out the list. It would have made so much more sense in a visual medium to be able to look at the chart and see, where's the 75% and where's the 25%? But instead you're listening to it in a linear statement. It's kind of like that scene where they're reading off the list of Terran Grial, Last Study by Corian and Adil. It's like that, but but it's all numbers because it's an economist explaining statistics.
You haven't done Stormlight Archive, right?
No, I haven't.
There is a chapter where the opening of the chapter is a string of numbers. A very, maybe 50, 60, 70 numbers. And Kramer reads them all.
Hat tip.
And it goes on for a while. It's on the flicker in terms of difficulty and weirdness when you're listening to it, like in the audiobook. It's like
skip ahead.
1 0 1 5 3 2 1 5 5 5 1 3 2 1 5 6 7 9 3. And you're just like, okay, yeah, skip. Nope, he's still reading. Skip. Nope, still reading.
Wow.
Skip. Yeah. It's impressive.
Yeah, and I'm sure that there was a chart, with the audiobook that I could have looked at, but I just, put it on because like, oh, this is an interesting title, and there was good parts of it, but economists don't make for the most thrilling prose, even when they're talking about very important things that are fascinating. They are just inherently dry people. Hey, Seth, how's it been? How you doing?
It feels both like it's been forever, but at the same time, we've been talking this whole time just about the TV show.
Yeah, we're back.
We're back to the books, and I am so happy to be back to the books. I cannot tell you.
Yeah.
Like, we sat down to talk, and we did like a recap podcast thing, and it was so nice to just talk to you without having to worry about the video. And I'm really excited to talk about the books just without even thinking about video in the slightest.
Yeah, there's nothing imagery based about what we're dealing with now. And for all of you who eschewed the show content, welcome back. We are back with you again. We are in our normal wheelhouse. This is the content you have been coming to us for 4 years for. We're back. The show is elsewhere and not to be thought about. Path of Daggers, we're just falling back into it. And how have we been otherwise in the 3 months since we were
3
here?
months, yeah.
Let our audience know how our lives have been going at all.
I mean, you guys know, COVID has sort of dominated everything. Christmas got canceled. A show came out. We produced a lot of episodes, but I've been pretty normal, pretty standard. Oh, I moved. That's right. I moved. Jesus.
Everything's normal. I moved.
I did move in the meantime. That's right. Yes. Just apartments. I had just a not great housing situation. I thought it was going to be good, and then you get into it, and it turns out it's not a great housing situation. So I'm now in a nice 2-bedroom apartment. I have the second bedroom as an office that I am sharing, and yeah, it's just been a bit of a whirlwind of a December. Definitely. I also turned 40 this December, so that was also kind of a thing. I didn't do much for that, but
congratulations though on surviving your 30s.
Thank you. Yep. I'm no longer in my 30s. So what else, man? Really excited to be not doing video work, right? Like, yeah. I'm amazed at how much I missed just doing audio, how much I missed doing books, how much I missed talking to you guys in a way that was a little more natural and a little more organic. The TV show definitely feels like it put a barrier in there. And that's just me and my expertise and what I'm good at. But man, I can't wait to get back to podcasting. Yeah. How about you, Radio? How was your month and 3 months of break?
Yeah, definitely got pretty burned out on content creation and fandom engagement because of the show. Mm-hmm. Really been enjoying my wood stove. The winter has been going predictably wonderfully with having a wood stove. I've been getting firewood from some people down the road. I've been getting a lot of exercise in, moving and splitting firewood both for this year and for next year. Yeah, some other people in my life, like in my family, there have been house sales and relocations that have been going well. I haven't been involved in them, but people in my life have been moving around in ways that are productive.
My parents moved. They actually moved to the coast. So now when I go see my parents, they're literally 3 blocks from the Oregon coast.
That is so awesome. Yeah, you were showing me pictures or you gave me their address, and then I Googled it because I'm a stalker who appreciates geography. Sure, yeah. Beautiful location. Absolutely appreciate where they are at. Speaking of the ocean, there was that whole eruption in Tonga that happened.
Oh, yeah.
That I'm continuing to sort of keep up on the news of that. And the news is mostly we're waiting for news. That happened. So if anyone missed
We're still waiting? Oh no.
Mostly aerial photography is coming through, but the underwater cable has still not been repaired. So for anyone who missed it, the biggest explosion on Earth in the past 30 years since the 1991 Pinatubo eruption occurred last Saturday. And there was a tsunami that went out across the entire Pacific Basin. We actually got a decent wave here in Oregon, not like destroying shit, but just distinctly a tsunami wave. But the island nation itself is still not really very coordinated in terms of what's happening because, their underwater cable for communications has been knocked out. So all we've got so far is aerial photography, pretty much, and a acknowledgement from them that they don't want COVID in their island nation, which has so far completely avoided COVID. So that is complicating relief efforts to deal with the fact that their water is all turning into toxic acid, while I also don't want to get involved in a pandemic. So that's kind of where my mind has been, is wrapping my head around how big the explosion was and how difficult it is to get access in there. But that's world news. That's not me news.
Tonga's literally stuck between a rock and a hard place. The rock being the eruption and the hard place being the pandemic.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. There isn't any confirmed death counts yet, but the odds of there being no deaths seems pretty low. So in this case, no news is kind of bad news.
Yeah.
But it was a very, very well studied eruption. We had tons of satellites looking at it from space. Well, obviously, where else would satellites look? But zillion different wavelengths and picture types being taken of the eruption. So it's the most well-studied, or will ultimately be the most well-studied eruption after another 30 years of science. And speaking of science, other cool news is that the James Webb Space Telescope has made it to its observational location at Lagrangian Point 2.
Sitting at L2.
Yep. So they still have to do months of calibrating the mirrors to get the pictures perfect before they can actually start doing the science. But it has launched, it has unfolded, it has gotten to its observation spot. That's really exciting. Huge props to all the scientists that did that.
And it got there at such a precise way that they don't have to use a lot of maneuvering fuel to park it. And that means that they're going to be able to extend the lifetime of the mission from 10 years to maybe 20 or more. It's amazing how much fuel they say. They did such a good job. They knocked it out of the park with this thing. So, I'm super excited about the James Webb Space Telescope. I think it's going to be, until we get a in-space way to measure gravity waves, I really do think that this is our best shot at having some idea as to what's going on at the early universe. And we'll do more to advance scientific study than almost anything else we're doing right now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is what Hubble was. This is the next Hubble in terms of the boundaries it's opening up, the technical horizons that are being expanded. And we're going to be able to look so much farther back in time in the history of the universe. It is really, really exciting. So yeah, we're nerding out pretty hard right now. The brown aja is strong in the room at this moment.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know what's going on, basically the Hubble, which is what we've had up to this point, it's looking at visible light. And the further back in time you go, the more that light gets stretched, and it actually gets stretched into the infrared. So there's actually a time limit behind which the Hubble can only look back so far, and then all the light disappears. And so we're sending up the James Webb, which can actually look at infrared instead of visible. So that's older light that's been coming to us for a longer period of time. And because it's older, it's been stretched because the universe is expanding into infrared light. And it's hard to detect infrared light because, everything that's warm gives off infrared, like you and me and Earth and what's that big glowing ball of light in the sky? Yeah. So all of that, they put up this big shield to block all that heat that's coming off so they can actually detect. But that's why it's so far away. That's why it's so expensive. It's very, very difficult to get something that cold.
Yeah. In the space of just a couple of feet, it goes from the hot side where the sun's hitting it to stupid cold. There's coolants and stuff making it cold. And also there was this whole thing where they had to pack a ginormous telescope into a very small space. So it was the most complicated origami-tastic piece of engineering ever. And they couldn't even fully test it on Earth because we don't have a vacuum space big enough to test it.
Or temperature's low enough, yeah.
Yeah, so they had to build a model that they could watch at the same time, but they never actually got to run the thing in before they sent it up. And unlike Hubble, which they were able to service with an astronaut, this is much, much, much farther away at L2, Lagrange point 2. It's like 1 million miles farther away. So no one can go fix it.
The difference between orbiting Earth and orbiting the sun.
Yeah.
Right? Like
it's a long way away.
So in case you hadn't noticed, we're both very excited about this.
Science and engineering, this is like our two wheelhouses. This is two things that we are both really excited about. And space is just, wah!
And there's so many fields right now. I don't want to say they're stuck, but we're at the point where advancing to the next level of knowledge takes a effort from a lot of people to build machines that operate on the edge of what we're capable of operating on. So, particle colliders is the one thing that's, particle physics, and on the microscopic, that's one way we're approaching what's really small. And then how do we approach what's really big? We have to look at the universe, and the James Webb is doing that. So really we have these two ends of the scale, which is the really small and the really big, and the James Webb is how we're pushing into, let's look at the really big. And we're finally able to look at something bigger. And it just happens that bigger means older in this case.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where we're so far out to the edge of our experience and knowledge that we're inventing things in order to do this thing. It's pushing so many bits of engineering and physical science and material science that there's undoubtedly cool implications down here at home that are going to come out of just the need to create this thing, the need to engineer this kind of stuff. It's really, really, really cool. It's an exciting time to be alive.
But no, we should be putting billionaires in space.
Sometimes the modern era is depressing, and sometimes it is super inspiring. But yes, I find this much more exciting than 5 minutes of a penis rocket going into orbit.
It never made it into orbit. The penis rocket hit low Earth atmosphere. Man, Jeff Bezos technically made it into space, but man, if you can't go around the planet once, it's just a plane that goes up real high. It's not a fucking orbit.
No, and it's part of the grand sweep of engineering and people getting into space and stuff. And at this point, clearly, governments are not going to get the funding that they need to do cool science because we're too busy blowing shit up. So we need people with stupid amounts of money to blow it on doing research. There's an argument to be made there, but James Webb is much more exciting.
And it is exciting that William Shatner was in space. There is something very satisfying, more satisfying about putting a billionaire in space, to be like, yes, I know he was an actor, and I know it's all for fun and games, but man, seeing the captain of the spaceship in actual space is pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, no, Captain Kirk getting to go to space on any level is... how can you... We are children of the 90s. How can we not?
Yeah.
Not that the 90s and Kirk, but you know what I mean? Star Trek. It's a thing.
And what I'd say is that Star Trek and Captain Kirk in particular inspired an awful lot of scientists and astronomers and astronauts to go into. So, there's a certain amount of the people who were inspired by Star Trek are paying back that fandom by helping put Shatner into space.
Yeah, and there's so many people that have gone on from Star Trek to maintain science communication. Yeah, the very real world impacts of Star Trek are very, very cool. So
this is where I insert my love letter to LeVar Burton. Just go ahead and slide that underneath.
Yeah.
The man keeps doing more and more amazing things.
Everything he touches is perfect. Yeah. It's just what it is.
Roots, Reading Rainbow, and Star Trek. Those three on his resume right there pretty much immortalize him, and then he just keeps doing great things.
Yeah, and then he does LeVar Burton Reads.
Which is, he's a podcaster too, which is like, oh yeah, okay. A reader, a podcaster, this man is after my... And a Star Trek guy, he's after my own heart, by far.
Yeah, he's amazing. So yeah, it's... that's mostly what's going on with our lives, is we are distracting ourselves from the mundane grind of existence with really cool science. I think we can wrap up this segment on that note. Science rules! Speaking of kitchen stuff, I got Brandon a sharpening stone or a set of sharpening stones for Christmas.
Yes, I saw that.
He is so happy. I didn't realize that you're supposed to be able to see the edge on a chef's knife. It had been that dull for that long. And it's a good knife. Like, it was when he got in culinary school. Yeah. But, after a couple days of him sharpening it and working on stuff, he comes over to me. He's like, look at this. I'm like, oh, that's what they're supposed to look like. So, yeah, tomatoes are no longer taking your life into your own hands to cut. And that has been very satisfying. So shout out to all of the Blue Aja people and other people who gave me feedback on how to select a set of stones because, yes, my chef is very, very happy with having his knife back.
Awesome. Oh my God, it's such a difference. I don't know if I told hi Aradia, but when I was cutting and I was doing that thing where you bend your knuckle back and you slice through the onion, and I brought my knife up too high and just sliced the corner off my knuckle. Just totally went through. It was my middle finger on my left hand, right there, and just took the corner off. It was probably, I don't know, like a toothpaste dollop sized wound.
Don't do that.
Came off clean, healed clean. And now, despite the huge chunk that came out of my finger, you can barely tell it was even cut because it was a sharp knife.
Nice.
Always cut yourself with sharp knives.
Yes, absolutely.
But, and then the other piece of safety is really, with a dull knife, you have to use a lot of force, and that's more likely to then, when you do slip, you're more likely to jam it into your hand. A sharp knife, because you're not using a lot of force, if it slips, usually I can stop it before it gets anywhere near my hand. And if I do cut myself, it's a clean cut as opposed to a tearing cut. So highly, highly, highly recommend sharpening your knives. And just one more note, that metal rod that comes with your knife set, that is not sharpening your knives.
No.
That is stropping your knives.
Yeah, it straightens.
Not sharpening.
It straightens the little tines, and it's they are. It is part of how you keep your knife sharp in an application sense.
Yes,
but it's not how you sharpen a knife.
Sharpening a knife removes metal. That metal strop does not. That just straightens it back out again.
Yeah,
because the little tip, the when you little knife fact, that tip is so narrow that it will actually curl over and bend as you're cutting, and you end up with like a rounded off tip. And so by running it along that metal thing, it actually straightens that tip right back out again.
Yeah, it's fascinating actually learning how edges work. You think, oh, it's just sharp, but like, what does that mean? Actually getting into the material science of what is sharp, and then you learn about all the different tools and methods and aspects of that. It's you learn a lot when you just want to answer a simple question of how do I cook better, like how do I not cut myself in the kitchen? Pretty soon you're down to like, well, these little metal spines come curling out and then you have to bend them back, but sometimes you just have to whack them off. And it's fascinating, interesting stuff, and it's good for you to have good tools. So
you got 2 whetstones, right? Were they whetstones?
Yeah, and with 2 grits on each one, so he has 4 grits to work with.
Do you know what those numbers are?
Got him a 1,000, 4,000, and 3,000, 6,000.
Okay. Yeah.
And then also like the straightening stone with like the diamond pattern on it so that you can actually make the stones like recover from the thing.
Nice. Yes.
And then one of the bricks also came with like a 400 grit, like small one. So you can just like, if you have like a horrible divot in the blade, you can just kind of like rough that out without spending your nice, 6,000 grit stone on it.
That's for your machete.
Yeah, pretty much. Because I read you only really need 2. And I was like, yeah, we have a lot of knives and he's, a smart guy. I'm going to get him 4 options. And they're made out of aluminum oxide, I want to say.
Okay.
And they're water stones. They came in these little bamboo trays that have like a decently grippy surface at the bottom.
Honestly, my experience, those suck. What I do is just wet a towel, put that down, and put the stone on top of the towel. I find that to be much smoother.
He had to do that in the end, because our counter has this stupid textured vinyl bullshit that didn't actually grip the bottom at all. So,
It doesn't matter. The bottom doesn't grip to shit. I bought those. I've had friends who bought those. Throw away maybe that little plastic rim around the bottom is helpful just so it doesn't chip anything. But that bamboo thing that it sits on is trash.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. It was definitely like, as I was doing my research, it was I mean, nobody gave me any useful information as to like what brands I should buy. Everyone I asked was like, oh, it doesn't matter. You just have to find one. So I was, like getting into...
because they're all made by the same company in China.
Right. So I was getting lost in, like getting these like kits with all of these like extra like sink holder traps and like this and that. And I had to like calm down and buy something much more simple. It was weeks. And then of course I threw out all my research in the end and just made an impulse purchase because I was so overwhelmed that I just like bought something that wasn't even on my list of like things that I was proing and conning out. It was ridiculous. The black Aja in me just emerged and overrode all my brown Aja instincts. But he's happy with it. And now, I mean, I can just hear the difference. You can hear dull spots like when you're cutting through like an onion or a potato and like it's just gone. It just like slides through like silk. It's amazing. And he says they're not even done yet. He wants to get in them with the really high grade one still. But it's a process.
Oh, yeah.
It's a process.
No, well, and the thing is, you can always go back and do more, right? Like, I probably take my stones, my knife at work, which I use extensively. I'm prepping probably more food in a day than most people make in a month. I take the stone to that probably every month or two, just to keep it sharp. But because I'm using that knife, 8 hours a day, 2 to 3 days a week.
Right. Yeah. Brandon cooks a lot and he's making, tons of kimchi and sauerkraut and cutting through a lot of cabbages. But yes, not quite for 8 hours a day.
And I'll tell you what really dulls your knife, meat. One of the things I do is I break down hanger steak. So, I'll spend 2 hours of my shift cutting through hanger steak. And by the end of that, the knife has lost a lot of its edge. I get through vegetables all day. Meat dulls your knife in an instant.
That makes sense. All right. Well, should we thank our patrons and then get into this chapter?
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?